Development Bank is promising to put in $79 million. The government of Angola will put in $29 million, and $16 million will come from the African Union. And so we hope that this will create the intended jobs that they're talking about, because then this can ease the situation in Angola. Otherwise, things are very tense.
Aaron, always great talking to you, my brother. Have a great week. We'll chat next week.
Thank you, Peter. You have a wonderful day.
All right, that's Aaron Ngambi, one of our regular commentators there, taking a look at the situation in the Central Africa region. And he'll be back next week at the same time. Right now, though, it's 6:30, which means it's time for your news headlines. And we say good morning once again to Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Judges in Cameroon have dismissed calls for the partial or total cancellation of the heavily disputed presidential election, saying they will announce the results on Monday next week. Major cities in the country have been rocked by protests, with opposition supporters alleging that the 12th October poll was marred by irregularities, including ballot stuffing. South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma could lose his pension if he fails to repay the $1.6 million of state funds spent on his legal fees. And the International Court of Justice has found that Israel has an obligation under international human rights law to respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of the Palestinian population. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sports as we get the latest from Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Good morning from the sports desk. South Africa's Banyana secured a valuable 1-1 draw against the Democratic Republic of Congo in Kinshasa on Wednesday night in the first leg of the second round Women's Africa Cup of Nations qualifying time. So the tightly contested encounter at the Pencoast Matres Stadium saw Dr. Desiree Ellis' side take the lead late into the first half through Khalebelani Motlhakana. Now, however, South Africa's advantage lasted only for a few minutes as the host side equalized before the halftime break through Ruth Monique. Now, Banyana will host the second leg at the FNB Stadium in Johannesburg next week, Tuesday. The winners of the second round tie will then secure qualification to the expanded 16-team Women's Africa of Nations tournament that is scheduled for Morocco in March and April of 2026. On to summer cricket news now. Suronan Muthusamy says he's going to remember his partnership with Kagiso Rabada for a very long time. That's after the two guided South Africa to a 404-run first innings total against Pakistan in the second test yesterday. So Muthusamy as well as Rabada shared an unlikely 98-run stand at the Rawalpindi Cricket Stadium, posting respective career best scores of 89 as well as 71 to give their side a 71-run lead. Now that was before some good work with the ball that had the host side leading with only 23 runs for the loss of 4 wickets at stumps on day 3 in the second test match. Now Muthusamy had high praise for Rabada, who notched up his first ever test century.
Initially it was to just play what's in front of us. KG was exemplary. It was an innings of the highest standard. I think the ball striking in those conditions was superb. He's such a naturally free flowing batter. That was an incredible innings from Cage. I ended up playing a bit of a supporting role as the innings went on because he was just seeing it so nicely and hitting it so clean. It was a fantastic partnership and one that we'll remember and hopefully can put us into a really strong position tomorrow to win the game.
All right, so action is set to resume at 7 a.m. Central African time this morning. Meanwhile, South Africa's Proteas women's coach, Mandla Mashimbi, reserved special praise for the team psychologist, Dr. Kokecho Tsebe, as well as the important role that she's been playing in getting the players mentally fit at this year's tournament. That's, of course, the ICC Women's Cricket World Cup. Mashimbi says Dr. Tsebe's presence in his team has made things a lot easier for him, and he can now focus more on the playing side of things while she works on their confidence despite the challenges faced in India and Sri Lanka.
No, I think bringing the psychologist here just helps us with keeping players calm, and for me as a coach, I just only have to focus on the cricketing side of things. So yeah, for us to have Dr. KK around is very helpful, which also just maybe will provide them with tools to deal with the pressures of playing in the World Cup. Pressures of not being selected, how to deal with anxiety and stuff like that. So I think she's playing a very, very big role in terms of that, which helps with the process of us wanting to be champions in this World Cup.
So among their victims at this year's World Cup were the co-hosts as well as the pre-tournament favourites India, who would have been shocked by the defeat to the Proteas women in front of their own fans. Mashimbi says there was no need to even motivate the team for that game, and they managed to silence not only the stadium but the entire country.
To be honest with you, I didn't have to motivate them for that game. I think everything was in front of them, and I think they were just up for it, for that game. And given the fact that, we had the start that we had, we knew actually where the gaps were, and then we knew what we need to do for us to actually win that match. Yes, it didn't go as smoothly as we would have liked, but, we showed character, and this is what this team has shown. I can't wait for us to come.
And finally, three-time Olympic gold medalist Gabby Thomas hopes to be back to training within weeks after missing the World Championships in September with an Achilles injury, the American said on Wednesday, as she's now eyes a busy 2026 on and off the track. Now, the Olympic champion in her signature 200 meters event helped the USA to golds in the 4x100 meter event, as well as the 4x400 meter relays at the Paris Olympic Games just last year, but was then forced to miss the Tokyo showpiece due to an injury that she has been managing since May of this year. Now, at the same time, Thomas, who was on hand to help celebrate Billie Jean's Signature Foundation in New York, has also taken up a major role in the business side of sport, helping start the company Aflos as a co-owner advisor. Now, the women's only meet from the standalone annual event to the multi-league format in 2026 amid a surge of popularity for women's sport. That's after enjoying a successful sophomore outing in New York earlier on this month. And that's a wrap from the sports desk at this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Leo tujadili kuhusu chipukizi wanaoimba nyimbo za wasanii wengine. Unadhani hili linatokana na nini, Omari?
Nadhani kweli kwamba tukizama muziki ya sasa, hasa wasanii ambao ni chipukizi, kwa kweli kwamba yani karibu kutoka muziki yao wenyewe, lakini wanakuwa wanataka kuhubiria muziki ya zamani, hizo muziki ya wengine ambao ni taimbo.
Wengine wanadai kufanya hivyo ni kupromote vipaji vyao haraka ili waweze kujulikana. Je, yawezekana kukawa na ukweli wowote au ndio kukosa kabisa kipaji cha kuandika mistari?
Ndio, unaona kwamba msanii anapoazimia kwamba kuchukua wimbo mwingine wa msanii mwingine na kurudia mara mbili sivyo, haionyeshi kwamba yani ndio wanaanza kazi ya muziki aizani, lakini ukiangalia kabisa asilimia kubwa utakuja kuona kwamba wanakosa ile mawazo ya kutunga muziki.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Right, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of business, commerce, economics. And at the business desk, we say good morning to Buntle Headbush. Good morning.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Morning, Peter. Thank you. And a very good morning to our listeners. And our top business story at this hour, Liberia is set to build stronger partnerships, smarter financing models and evidence-based reforms, focusing on improving its public health agenda and preparedness for health emergencies through a conference on public health in Africa 2025-26. The three-day gathering will highlight Liberia's efforts to transform women, children and adolescents' health despite global funding challenges. Medical officer at Liberia's Ministry of Health, Dr. Catherine Cooper.
We have tried to decentralize service delivery, especially at county and district level. We have tried to improve our community approach when it comes to us improving our maternal and newborn services or sexual reproductive health across the country. So we still have few steps or few progress to be made. But Liberia, over the past few years, have made significant progress. And we hope to do more as a country with partners in the global leadership network support.
Oil company Shell says it's applied to gain the right to appeal against a decision of a South African court to block exploration in the offshore Block 567. The company says it's filed an application for leave to appeal alongside the government in relation to the Western Cape High Court's judgment on Block 567, which overturned the company's environmental permit for an oil exploration block off the west coast of South Africa. Shell says it's of the view that the High Court judgment misinterprets the National Environmental Management Act. Oil companies are aiming to drill off South Africa's west coast, where the so-called Orange Basin extends from Namibia southwards into South African waters. The Cabinet of KwaZulu-Natal Province in South Africa has approved the establishment of an essential investment office aimed at eliminating bureaucracy and redundant regulations. The aim is to eliminate delays in the commencement of major projects. This announcement was made during the KwaZulu-Natal Trade and Investment Conference in Durban. The conference brings together international and domestic investors with an aim to boost the province's GDP and create job opportunities. MEC for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Reverend Musa Zondi, elaborates.
The Provincial Executive Council, which is the Cabinet of KwaZulu-Natal, approved the proposal from the Premier to say in his office he wanted to establish, which is already established, a central investment office which is going to facilitate to work with these investors so that they don't run around to Home Affairs on their own. They don't run around applying for electricity on their own. They don't run around to municipalities applying for this paper. All must be done on the same desk within a few days so that these investors can hit the ground running.
South Africa aims to revive its pebble bed modular reactor by the first quarter of next year. The Minister of Electricity, Ndoro, says plans are far advanced to lift the care and maintenance status of the PBMR. South Africa halted its PBMR research in 2010 after spending more than $577 million. Ramokgopa says there are huge opportunities around the world with major players in the field of small modular reactors. He said China, South Korea, the US and Russia are among countries that could partner with South African Nuclear Energy Corporation on developing the reactors. The integrated resource plan that's expected to be published this week outlines more than 105 gigawatts of new generation capacity by 2039. The Starlink satellite communications network run by Elon Musk says it's cut service to more than 2,500 Starlink devices linked to scam centers in Myanmar. Starlink is operational in 24 countries in Africa, but regulatory and local ownership hurdles, particularly in South Africa, have slowed down its progress. The BBC's Jonathan Head has the details.
Campaigners against the international scam business, which has proliferated across Southeast Asia in recent years, have long cited Elon Musk's Starlink satellite service as critical communications technology, which enables the mainly Chinese crime syndicates to run their schemes from remote locations along the Thai-Myanmar border. Now Starlink has responded by cutting the service to more than 2,500 terminals it has identified as being used for online fraud in Myanmar. This decision follows the takeover of one of the biggest scam compounds, known as KK Park, by the Myanmar military, as it retakes territory lost to insurgent groups over the past 2 years.
And our time for our first look at the indicators this morning. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,465 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 25. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 20. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 52. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rial 39, Russia 81 rubles 50. In India, it's 87 rupees 74, China 7 yuan 12. In South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 41 cents this morning, down almost 10 cents from yesterday morning. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,091 per ounce, platinum at $1,575 per ounce. Both have come down a bit from yesterday as well, while Brent crude oil is up at $64.30 a barrel this morning. And those are your business news. I'll be back with another update in the next hour. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa. Exclusive to Channel Africa.
Our G20 fact for this morning. Did you know the G20 is that its decisions are not legally binding? It is an informal forum where member states make voluntary commitments, but despite the lack of an enforcement mechanism, these commitments carry considerable political weight and often drive international policy and cooperation. And that's our G20 fact for this morning, the 23rd of October.
G20 in Africa. Exclusive to Channel Africa.
South Africa's Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Dr. Beda Nzimande, has called for a critical re-examination of Africa's research priorities and funding models, warning that the continent's scientific agenda remains heavily shaped by external interests. Speaking on Wednesday at the Human Science Research Council, the HSRC in South Africa, at the National Research Foundation, he engaged a research conference. Nzimande cited a 2025 journal article highlighting that although Africa accounts for 14% of the world's population, it contributes less than 1% of global research output. Channel Africa reporter Michael Mbeo was there and filed this report.
The conference, which is taking place in Kempton Park, a city in the eastern region of Gauteng Province, South Africa, is being held under the theme Engaged Research as a pathway to bridging knowledge in society. The conference aims to identify barriers to engaged research and strategies to overcome them, among others, ethics approval structures, promote knowledge exchange on methodologies, approaches and best practices, facilitate networking between academia, community organizations, industry and the government, showcase case studies that demonstrate engaged research's real-world benefits, and consolidate learnings on how engaged research can be applied in different contexts. In his remarks, Minister Nzimande raised concern over Africa's limited contribution to global research.
2025 journal article titled Status of African Research and its Contribution to Global Health Research, a review and an opinion, observes that, and I quote it, although Africa accounts for 14% of the world's population, it produces very little published research, with less than 1% of global research output credited to African scholars.
He challenged African countries, and South Africa in particular, to reflect on who sets the research agenda.
As we place research at the center of Africa's development, we should also concern ourselves with a number of other critical questions. Questions such as, Who determines the focus areas for the research that is conducted by public science institutions in Africa? But it doesn't only apply to the rest of the continent. We here in South Africa, we must also ask that question, given our own history. To what extent have we deracialized research questions that are being asked by our public research institutions? To what extent have we engendered and gone to eliminate the patriarchal nature of many research questions in our own country and indeed in our continent?
Furthermore, Nzimande said the questions should also scrutinize who funds the researchers and whose interests it ultimately serves. He warned that Africa's dependence on donor funding often results in research that benefits outsiders rather than local communities.
The other question is, who funds the research that is conducted by our public institutions in Africa, and what is the agenda of those funders? Apart from the persistence of the coloniality of knowledge, Africa's research agenda continues, unfortunately, to be donor dependent. And so the donors will ask research questions that in the end benefits them and less the continent. This dependence that I'm talking about continues to present us with such problems such as misalignments between our primary research questions and local needs. And also those projects tend to be short-term in nature. And this huge other challenge we have, which is the loss of intellectual property from the continent and the phenomenon which we call the brain drain, by the way.
Nzimande stressed the urgent need for Africa to develop a sovereign research agenda, highlighting the continent's vulnerability during the COVID-19 pandemic when it was last in line for vaccines. He emphasized that Africa must build its own research capacity and prioritize pandemic preparedness to ensure self-reliance in future health crises.
If there's one thing that should serve as a major mobilizing factor for the development of a sovereign research agenda for Africa, it is our tragic experience at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. We were the worst affected and we were the last in the queue to get vaccines. During this period, we found ourselves in a situation where the lives of millions of people on the African continent were dependent on vaccines and therapeutics from other parts of the world. We should never find ourselves in this precarious situation again. And one of the ways of avoiding this is by developing a sovereign research agenda. Part of a sovereign research agenda for the African continent is that it must at the center place pandemic preparedness, amongst other things.
NRF CEO Professor Fulufelo Nilamondo emphasized that engaged research conducted with communities rather than on them, is essential for meaningful and inclusive scientific progress in the Global South.
In the Global South, the question is no longer whether science matters, but how it matters, to whom and with what change. But change has become a constant. Colleagues, I want to say today, engaged research is our answer. The NRF defines engaged research as a research that integrates considered approaches to engage communities and society across the full research cycle, so that communities are primarily stakeholders. They become active contributors and beneficiaries of the work. In other words, we must move from research on people to research with the people.
To achieve the above, Nilamondo highlighted 3 key issues in research practices for ensuring research is both accessible and responsible.
To deliver on these, there are 3 shifts that are non-negotiable, and I'll just go through them very quickly. The first one is the movement from extraction to co-creation, something that was covered fully by the CEO of HSRC. Communities must shape the questions, they must shape the methods, they must be involved in the data and the outcomes. Second, we need to move from outputs to outcomes. Excellence does not end at the publication. It includes policy influences, it includes practice change, it includes a capability built in communities. We want to move from open by default to open and ethical by design.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
A new witness took to the stand on day 15 of the Madlanga Commission, sitting at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College in South Africa's capital, Pretoria. The commission was established by President Cyril Ramaphosa following allegations of misconduct, criminality, political interference and corruption in the country's police sector. For details, we're joined by Sibahle Mota, who is covering the story for the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Sibahle, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning to you, Asanda, and to the listeners.
Can you bring us to speed in terms of those who are not South African, who are our listeners on Channel Africa, why this commission was established, how far we've come until we get to this point, and we'll get the latest?
Oh, definitely. So this commission was established by President Cyril Ramaphosa following that explosive media briefing that was held by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi in July. So what essentially it is investigating rather, is political interference in law enforcement agencies, as well as the criminal syndicate networks that had infiltrated, these law enforcement agencies. And up to so far, I mean, we've seen testimony from Lieutenant General Ndlatla Mkhwanazi himself, who's made these allegations, as well as the National Police Commissioner, Fani Masemola, as well as other, specialists in the field of the police services and the National Director of Priority. And right now, we actually this week got into witness testimony from witnesses who have worked very closely in this case, and they've been investigating one particular murder of Armand Swart, which has managed to crack even other murders, that have transpired. So this is where we are hearing the witness testimony of witness B.
So take us through that then. Yesterday, we heard in the Madlanga Commission, South Africans heard a testimony from witness B, a detective from the Gauteng Organized Crime Unit.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's a woman. We can only hear her voice. She is testifying remotely because of safety reasons and the nature of the sensitive cases that they are handling. But I mean, witness B is one lady who was also responsible for cracking this Armand Swart case, which would essentially lead police to arresting even more suspects linked to other cases. And essentially, what she was saying, this Armand Swart, who was gunned down in April 2024, was a case of mistaken identity, in a sense that these assassins are namely Katiso Katie Molefe, who's believed to have ordered the hit, as well as other 3 accomplices, which include a veteran police officer and 2 other men, had planned this crime quite extensively and ultimately gunning down the wrong person. So Armand Swart was an employee who worked for QTech, where Katiso Molefe, who, we all know, has been in the media quite extensively in South Africa, has been linked to other various cases and is believed to be the mastermind. They had ordered this hit because they believe that Armand Swart was standing in their way of getting a very crucial Transnet tender. But unfortunately, it was not Armand Swart who had, blown or sent the alarm bells about their contracts, and essentially they gunned down the wrong person. So she testified extensively about that, saying that Armand Swart's case was a case of mistaken identity, and this assassination was not intended for him to begin with.
So also we heard testimony previously relating to the South African Police Services Organized Crime Unit, Major General Richard Shibiri. Can you tell us more?
So Richard Shibiri essentially is like the big boss of witness A and witness B, and he has tried to interfere in this case extensively. When witness A and witness B cracked case, he was seen as sort of intimidating them and sort of scaring them, saying that this person, Katiso Molefe, as well as this warrant officer, Beda, were very dangerous people who were in fact also associated with other very dangerous people. So you could see that he was trying to intimidate them and also interfere in their line of work. And I mean, at one point, they were invited to a party on this hotel, which witness A called a White House on the Hills, which is in North Cliff. And witness A just felt like the invitation there was a way for these police generals or the senior police officers were trying to entice witness A and witness B to sort of gauge if they were up for sale, in a sense that they would interfere in these investigating processes against Katiso Molefe, warrant officer, Buletau and 2 other accomplices. So, I mean, his name has popped up, and even Witness be saying yesterday that, when they were approached and sort of enticed with money, she found it very, very unusual, and she was uncomfortable because this essentially was coming from a senior police officer who was essentially her boss, and it showed to her that he was trying to interfere in the matter.
Sbahle, thank you so much for the update. We'll leave it there for now, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Asanda.
Sbahle Motai, who was covering who has been covering this story around the Madlanga Commission for the South African Broadcasting Corporation, looking at allegations of misconduct, criminality, political interference and corruption in the country's police sector, of course established by South Africa's president, this commission, Cyril Ramaphosa. Seven o'clock Central African time it is, and we enter the second hour of Rise and Shine. Good morning to you. If you've just joined us, we come to you live from Johannesburg. That's where our studios are. You can connect with us via www.channelafrica.co.za. At Channel Africa 1 is our social media platform handle, and we are on live streaming YouTube. What do you call it? The channel is. The platform is there also. We are everywhere, guys. We are everywhere. Even my brain can't remember all of those places. My name is Asanda Beda.
Good morning, Asanda Beda from the Eastern Cape.
How are you, Peter Ndoro, from good. Zambia and Zimbabwe?
And everywhere.
And everywhere. And the UK.
Yeah, no, today, this next half an hour, we've got an interesting conversation that I'm looking forward to us having. The Vice President of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent is in Ethiopia this week, and we're going to be chatting to him. He's wanting to address the African Union about the humanitarian crisis across the continent, and there are some very, very sad places at the moment. Sudan comes to mind straight away. And we'll be chatting to him about the work that they're doing and, what they need to help us across the continent. And we'll also be taking a look at another look at what's been happening regarding corruption in police and also allegedly in the judiciary. But this time, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu was in Parliament facing tough questions from an ad hoc committee there. And we'll be unpacking that as well in this half hour. But first, let's catch you up with the day's news. Here's Onelen Sinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Judges in Cameroon have dismissed calls for the partial or total cancellation of the heavily disputed presidential election, saying they will announce the results on Monday next week. Major cities in the country have been rocked by protests, with opposition supporters alleging that the October 12 poll was marred by irregularities, including ballot stuffing. Judges on the Constitutional Council dismissed 8 petitions, citing insufficient evidence of irregularities or a lack of jurisdiction to annul the results. Opposition candidate Issa Chiroma Bakri has already declared himself winner, a claim rejected by allies of the 92-year-old President Paul Biya, who is seeking another 7-year term. A senior official of Tanzania's main opposition party has been arrested amid a crackdown on dissenting voices ahead of next week's general election. The deputy chairperson of Chadema, John Heche, was detained while attempting to attend the treason trial of party leader Tundu Lissu. In a statement, Chadema alleged that the government planned to arrest senior party leaders and detain them until after the election, which will take place on the 29th of October. South Africa's Police Minister Senzo Mchunu has admitted that the South African Police Service is battling with corruption and factionalism at its top structures. He appeared for a fourth day before Parliament's ad hoc committee yesterday. The committee is investigating allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the justice system made by the KwaZulu-Natal Province Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Mchunu says drastic changes are needed to overhaul the SAPS and to restore public confidence.
Down the line, you would have needed some measures, maybe not wholesale overhaul, but you would have needed measures to overhaul certain aspects of South African police service if you are to gain confidence. One of those is to say, what are the norms and standards for a police station? Police and policing is what people see on a daily basis.
South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma could lose his pension if he fails to repay the $1.6 million of state funds spent on his legal fees. The High Court in Pretoria ordered that the former president pays interest on the money accumulated over 20 years within 60 days. If he fails to do so, his assets or pension have been attached. Zuma's legal team had argued that the funds were paid to his legal teams based on the government's own legal advice. Judge Anthony Miller granted permission to the state attorney to seek a right of execution of immovable or movable assets of the former president if he fails to pay. The court battle follows a 2021 Supreme Court of Appeals ruling that found the state was liable for Zuma's legal costs related to his long-running corruption and fraud cases stemming from the 1999 arms deal and other cases instituted against him in his personal capacity. Lastly, the International Court of Justice has found that Israel has an obligation under the international human rights law to respect, protect and fulfill the human rights of the Palestinian people. The ICJ rendered its advisory opinion in response to a UN General Assembly request on Israel's obligation to facilitate aid to Palestinians. This after Israel banned operations by the UN relief and works agencies for Palestinian refugees. Sharon Bryce Peace reports.
The 11 judges decided that Israel, as the occupying power, was required to fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law by ensuring that the population in the occupied Palestinian territory had the essential supplies of daily life. The court said Israel had to agree to facilitate by all means at its disposal relief schemes on behalf of the OPT population, so long as that population was inadequately supplied, as has been the case in Gaza. This included relief provided by the UN, its entities including UNRWA and other international organizations and third states.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, the DRC as well as South Africa share the spoils in a WAFCON qualifier, while Novak Djokovic pulls out of the Paris Masters. Details coming up at 7:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Minutes past 7 Central African Time, and we continue to take a look at this story that's captured the attention of South Africans, and this is where the country's most serious security and governance crisis is currently unfolding. The Minister of Police, Senzo Mchunu, has told the country's parliament that the security cluster, the network of agencies responsible for policing, justice and intelligence, is very weak. Meanwhile, the Provincial Police Commissioner of KwaZulu-Natal, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, has publicly accused the minister of direct interference in sensitive investigations, including the disbandment of a special task team probing politically motivated killings and alleged links with between senior officials and organized crime syndicates. And these are pretty explosive allegations which triggered calls for a judicial commission of inquiry and put the integrity of South Africa's criminal justice system under intense scrutiny. Well, for an update on what's been happening at the ad hoc committee investigation or questioning. We're joined by SABC reporter Zaline Merrington. Zaline, great to have you on the program.
Good morning, Peter.
All right. I think Senzo Mkunu's done with his questioning, hasn't he? Looking back, what has come through in the main?
Yes, he had 4 very long days before the committee, and that has been the longest that a witness has appeared before Parliament's ad hoc committee. What came, and I think that what he's been very consistent in is that he takes full responsibility for the disbandment of the political killing stars team. And he also said that he did it on his own account. He did not consult with anyone. He did not discuss it beforehand with anybody, because that was something that General Mkonazi also put to the committee, that he does not think that the minister was behind the directive to disband the PKTT, and that he was convinced, he repeated it to the committee several times, that he was convinced that that letter was not drafted by the minister. But the minister repeatedly over the past 4 days assured MPs that he was the sole author of that letter and that no one had told him to disband it. It's very curious for many people that he decided to send off that directive on the 31st of December last year. Obviously, many people are, it's just that is not a date where many people expect for such big decisions to be made. And Mkunu himself was already at home, not necessarily on leave, but he was at home when he sent off that directive. So that was the first thing. He said that he takes full responsibility, and that there was no third party involvement in the drafting of that letter. He also said that he briefed President Cyril Ramaphosa on the disbandment of the PKTT, and that the president was in agreement with him. That's again addressing something that General Mkonazi, who's obviously the main witness for the committee, also brought to the attention of the committee, that he doubts whether President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's had high praise for this task team, that he even knew that the minister had made this decision. But according to Mkunu, he did inform the president, even though it was after he had sent off that directive. Another thing that the minister, I think, was also quite consistent on was that he thought the reason why it was okay, or why he thought it was a good idea for the disbandment, was because the task team was never meant to be a permanent unit in the first place. It was just supposed to take care of the task for which it was established, and then it was supposed to, be, I don't want to say disbanded, but it wasn't supposed to be a permanent unit. He also said that the unit was, since 2022, the unit was not funded. And he also believed that there were more burning issues, among others, taxi violence, murders on the Cape Flats, that required much more attention, and that also could use the resources that have been spent on the PKTT. So those two things, I think, were the constants that came out from the minister over the past 4 days.
If social media is anything to go by, a lot of people just aren't convinced with his version of things. And it seemed also that a lot of time was spent on semantics. What is a unit? What is a department? Organograms, and even things like the meaning of the word immediate. It did seem a little trivial at times.
And also very wasteful, Peter. I would say, and that was also something that Action SA MP Darlene James, very exasperated, early afternoon, early evening yesterday, saying, "Why are we spending so much time? We know what the word immediate means. It does not mean next week. It means now." So, it was, there were times when you thought, geez, let's move on, even as a journalist covering it. But there were times when there was a lot of, I think, almost filling up time. And you're referring to social media. I would say that according to social media users, the minister did not do very well over the past 4 days. And of course, he also touched on public perception yesterday. And interestingly enough, he said to turn around SAPS, a complete overhaul is needed, and less talking and more doing is required. And I don't know if the minister grasped that irony, because even, several times over the past 4 days, MPs, even from the ANC, had to stop him and say, Minister, we have limited time, so can you shorten your answers? So, yes, lots of words were used over the past few days. I'm not sure how many of those actually found a positive landing with the public who's very interested in this matter.
Who's the next person, or is that it in terms of the ad hoc committee?
Peter, the ad hoc committee's deadline is the 28th of November, so we still have quite a long way to go. And I think that the committee still probably has about 30 plus witnesses that they want to see before them. Today is also a very significant figure. The former police minister, Beki Cele, who, of course, it was during his tenure as police minister, and he's obviously he's Mngcunu's predecessor. It was under his tenure that the PKTT was established. So, of course, many MPs would want to know. I would imagine. What he thought of the performance of the PKTT, whether it was okay for it to be disbanded when it was doing really well, the cost thereof, how that was managed. And I think also there will be questions to Mr. Clearly about his alleged links with characters such as Vusimuzikat Matlala, who is currently in maximum prison for charges of attempted murder. And even the controversial Northwest businessman Brown Mokgotsi, who is alleged to have access to very sensitive intelligence information as well. So he's appearing over the next 2 days, and I am very sure that it will also be very interesting, and maybe hopefully we'll get more light shed on this very sensitive issue of national security.
Celine, thanks so much indeed for that update.
Thank you, Peter.
That's SABC reporter Zelene Merrington following the, I guess we're calling it the Madlanga issue, but that's the name of the judge who's got his own commission. But it is really about state security and the judicial system, and allegations that have been leveled against that by the provincial police commissioner Mkhwanazi.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et le bon Dieu pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Cameroon's political crisis deepens as the Constitutional Council on Wednesday dismissed all petitions challenging the October 12 presidential election, clearing the way for President Paul Biya, reportedly poised for an eighth term, to extend his 42-year rule. Tensions are rising on the streets, particularly in northern cities like Marua and Garua, where clashes between security forces and opposition supporters have already turned violent. One teacher was tragically killed in Garua during protests, while opposition candidate Issa Chiroma insists he won the election and refuses to accept any other outcome. We now go live to our Yaoundé correspondent, Moki Kinzeka, for a closer look at the situation on the ground. Moki, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Good morning. Thank God we are safe in Yaoundé. We are still safe.
Okay, so you're safe there. What's the mood like in also cities like Marua and Garua after the Constitutional Council dismissed all petitions challenging the October 12 presidential election?
Now, the people of Marua and Garwa were not even waiting for the outcome of the Constitutional Council because they did not petition the Constitutional Council for the partial or total cancellation of the votes. The people of Garwa say Issa Chiroma won. So what was happening at the Constitutional Council was not their business. They continue insisting, and Chiroma granted a press conference in which he's calling on all Cameroonian people to protect their votes, to go out to the streets massively and make sure that Mr. Biya leaves power. He said, even if it's violence, then violent, let it be. He was even asking, he said, if it is that Biya had the majority of votes as he claims, then why is he deploying troops to go again to stop the people who voted for him from going out to manifest? If the people actually voted for him, they would not have been going out to manifest. Also, there was another brutal killing yesterday. The lawmaker for Akko in the northwest region of Cameroon, Honorable Abe Michael, was brutally murdered by suspected Ambazonian fighters. He went and campaigned for Biya, and remember, before the elections, the English-speaking separatists said they would never allow the elections to take place. So they went and brought results that Mr. Biya was leading in Akko in Donga Mantum division, where he comes from. As he was coming back, he was abducted by the separatist fighters, and yesterday he was brutally murdered. Protests also were in Yaoundé, in the nation's capital, Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé, yesterday. In fact, they have been degenerating and extending to almost all the towns with a lot of deployment of security forces. On the other hand, the response of the government has been to send senior state functionaries to plead with civilians not to go and protest. They have also sent traditional rulers, they have sent the clergy to go to towns and villages and beg people to stay at home. But the people say they will stay at home only when Issa Chiroma's victory is accepted by the people, by the government. They also, yesterday, the Cameroonians were expecting the declaration of results today. And the Minister of Higher Education said universities should not be open. Students stayed at home. They were to stay at home today. Unfortunately, again, the government saw the tension and decided that the results will be declared only on Monday. That's the situation in Cameroon now.
As far as that call then by opposition Chiroma, what are the supporters of Chiroma saying and doing? Have they heeded his call?
They are heeding his call, and as he said it will be gradual, that people will be coming out gradually. As the days are going by, that's how the number of people protesting is on the streets is increasing. So people are adhering to Chiroma's call for violence for until Mr. Biya accepts the results. In fact, Yaoundé yesterday, there was a heavy deployment of troops. When young people came with placards, with billboards, saying that President Paul Biya should leave power, that Chiroma won. A claim that the supporters of President Paul Biya really deny. They still have a feeling, or they say they insist that Mr. Biya won the election.
Thank you so much, Moki. We'll leave it there, and we appreciate this update.
You're welcome.
That's our correspondent, Moki Kinzeka, reporting from Yaoundé on the unfolding situation there in Cameroon. So the country went to the polls to vote. Tensions are remaining high as the country is awaiting the official announcement of who the next president will be in the country. As you heard, the protests are intensifying. the call from government authorities for those protests to not continue has not been heeded by Cameroonians. So a spirit of, I guess, anger there, but also hope and pushing forward in terms of what the people of Cameroon want to see in change.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Africa is grappling with a surge of humanitarian emergencies, from protracted conflicts to mass displacement and breakdowns in essential services. Joining us live from Addis Ababa is Gilles Cabonnier, who's the Vice President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, and with decades of experience in humanitarian work and development economics. He's in Ethiopia this week to address the African Union Peace and Security Council, meeting regional authorities in advance efforts to protect civilians and promote international humanitarian law across the continent. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter, and thank you for having me.
An important visit, I guess, particularly to the African Union for you, about the humanitarian situation across the continent. In broad terms, what is the situation that you're seeing on our continent?
Well, Africa is definitely a continent of paradoxes because as you mentioned, I arrived 2 days ago in Addis Ababa, which is a bustling city with a very dynamic young population. But at the same time, we are working in Africa in over 50 active armed conflicts. And this is an increase of 45% in the number of armed conflicts over the past 5 years. If you wish, about 40% of active armed conflicts in numbers are in Africa. And we have also about half of the internally displaced population in this context across Africa. So we see that there are many crises that tend to be forgotten or neglected by the international community. And for us, Africa is a top priority. We maintain about 40% of our operations and 40% of our staff also working across Africa. And in this framework, engaging our African counterparts, including the African Union, is of course essential.
So what message are you delivering essentially to the African Union Peace and Security Council in particular?
Well, in this context, the main message is that it is absolutely essential to uphold the norms that are enshrined in international humanitarian law. And if you look at the Geneva Conventions and international humanitarian law that protects civilians, that protects hospitals, that protects the medical mission in armed conflicts, that also protects access to essential services like water, like sanitation, like energy. All these basic principles are not new. Actually, many find their origin in great African traditions and customary norms. Ubuntu in Southern Africa, Udrama here in Eastern Africa. And I think that these are basic norms of humanity where even an enemy, once wounded, once captive, has to be treated humanely, and that even wars have limits. And this is very important because it is a key ingredient to preserve an enabling environment for peace building and later reconciliation. And it is also essential to try to preserve development progresses that have been done and to reduce the costs, both the human cost, of course, but also the social and economic cost of then dealing with the consequences of armed conflicts. So it's really an engagement with African leaders on making respect for international humanitarian law a political priority.
And given the work that you do, the neutrality hat that you like to wear, How difficult has it been, particularly in conflict zones, to access the people in need and for you to be able to do your work?
Well, Peter, this is a very important issue because indeed we try to mobilize the expertise, the colleagues that have the, surgeons, war surgeons, people who are able to support hospitals, people who are able to bring life-saving assistance to the population caught up in conflict. But of course, at the same time, we must be granted access as a purely neutral, independent, and impartial humanitarian organizations. And this is why we engage with all the parties to armed conflicts, of course, states, the militaries, but also armed groups, to explain our strictly humanitarian endeavor and to get the necessary security guarantee and also the necessary license to operate, so to have access to the people in need, together with our organization which are within our own movement of the international movement of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. So we, of course, bring all this assistance with national societies of the Red Cross and Red Crescent in each and every country where we work.
Gilles, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thanks so much indeed for joining us on the program, and we wish you and your organization the best with the important work that you're doing on our continent.
Thank you, Peter. I wish you a very good day.
That was Gilles Carbonnier, who's the Vice President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, Red Crescent Society as well, talking to us about the humanitarian crises that our continent is facing and the work that they hope to continue doing despite the challenges, particularly in conflict zones across Africa. It's 7:30, which means it's time for your news headlines. Here's Onelin Sinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Judges in Cameroon have dismissed calls for the partial or total cancellation of the heavily disputed presidential election, saying they will announce the results on Monday next week. Major cities in the country have been rocked by protests, with opposition supporters alleging that the 12th October polls was marred by irregularities, including ballot stuffing. A senior official of Tanzania's main opposition party has been arrested amid a crackdown on dissenting voices ahead of next week's general election. And the International Court of Justice has found that Israel has an obligation under international human rights law to respect, protect and fulfill the human rights of Palestinian population. Channel Africa News, I'm Onelin Sinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now it's time to check in with what's happening in the world of sports. Good morning, Musubudi Makura again.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning once again from the Sports Desk. So South Africa's Banyana secured a valuable 1-1 draw against the Democratic Republic of Congo in Kinshasa last night in the first leg of their second round Women's Africa Cup of Nations qualifying tie. Now, the tightly contested encounter at the Pencoast Matres Stadium saw Banyana take the lead late in the first half through Kgalebelane Motlhakana. However, South Africa's advantage lasted only for a few minutes as the host side equalized just before the halftime break through Ruth Monique. Banyana will host his second leg at the FNB Stadium in Johannesburg next week, Tuesday. Reminder, of course, that the winners of these two second-round ties, should I say, will then qualify for the expanded 16 Women's Africa of Nations tournament that is scheduled for April and March of 2026. On to some cricket news now. Sunaran Muthusamy says he'll remember his partnership with Kagiso Rabada for a very long time after the two guided South Africa to a 404-run first innings total against Pakistan in the second test. Now, Muthusamy as well as Rabada shared an unlikely 98-run stand at the Rawalpindi Cricket Stadium, posting respective career best scores of 89 and 71 respectively to take their side to a 71-run lead. Now, this was before some good work with the ball had the host leading by only 23 runs for the loss of 4 wickets at stumps on day 3 in the second innings. Muthusamy says that they had high praise, or rather who had high praise for Rabada, also notched up his first test century on the day.
Initially it was to just play what's in front of us. KG was exemplary. It was an innings of the highest standard. I think the ball striking in those conditions was superb. He's such a naturally free flowing batter. That was an incredible innings from Cage. I ended up playing a bit of a supporting role as the innings went on because he was just seeing it so nicely and hitting it so clean. It was a fantastic partnership and one that we'll remember and hopefully can put us into a really strong position tomorrow to win the game.
Muthusamy also fell just 11 runs short of his maiden test ton, but has seemed less concerned about that than the massive contribution he made to dig the team out of that hole. So South Africa had a terrible morning session where they lost a few wickets within a very short space of time and would have been resigned to a first innings deficit that had not been for the gutsy batting of the two, including Keshav Maharaj's 30-run contribution. He also explained the challenges he faced towards the back end of his innings.
I lost a little bit of rhythm towards the back end of my innings. Found it a little bit tough to score, especially with the field, everybody being spread and almost everybody being on the boundary. It was just to keep batting, and keep the tempo that we were going at. KG was still batting really well. He probably just didn't quite hit that one as clean as he would have liked and ended up just dragging it. Yes, naturally, I think natural progression, the pitch will wear a little bit and will get a little bit tougher to bat, but that's natural and we're looking forward to the challenge and the last innings of the game.
Right there, he speaks about looking ahead to the challenge. The challenge at the moment is on the Pakistani side. At the moment, 105 for the loss of 8 wickets after 42 overs. They lead South Africa by 34 runs. And if South Africa manages to get the last 2 remaining wickets, we can probably say that South Africa are then in a dominant and a commanding position as they'll be hoping to close off this test on day 4. On to some tennis news now. The world number 5 Novak Djokovic announced that he will not compete at the upcoming Paris Masters, which will be held next week from the 27th of October to the 2nd of November. In a post shared on social media, Djokovic did not give any reason for his decision and also expressed his hope to return to the event in 2026. Djokovic has not played the Paris Masters since winning a record 7th title at the ATP Masters 1000 event in 2023, as he also skipped the 2024 edition. The 38-year-old was not expected to play the prestigious indoor hardcourt tournament this year, given the way that he has managed his schedule in the past 2 seasons. Djokovic also appeared at the Shanghai Masters earlier on this month, which was his only 12th ATP level tournament for the 2025 season. Now, the Serbian also confirmed, his confirmation rather, that he will miss the Paris Masters comes 3 days after he also retired in his 3rd place playoff match with Taylor Fritz at the 6 Kings Slam exhibition match played in Saudi Arabia this past weekend. And finally, Max Verstappen chases a 4th win in 5 starts this weekend as he bids to heap more pressure on McLaren duo of Oscar Piastri as well as Lando Norris at the Mexican City Grand Prix, one of his most rewarding tracks. Now, Red Bull's 4-time world champion, who has won 5 times in 7 years at the high-altitude Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, has cut Piastri's lead ahead of him in 3rd position from 104 points to 40 since August with a scintillating burst of form. Now, Piastri still leads teammate Lando Norris by 14 points, but he has lost his metronomic consistency, and as McLaren appear now to be floundering to match Red Bull for pace, he appears also like Norris to be weighed down by the pressure of the title battle. So after finishing on the podium in every race bar one since the season opener in Australia, his last three results have been a retirement, 4th and 5th. It's 7:38 a.m. Central African Time. That's a wrap of your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. I'm back with the final sports update on Africa Rise and Shine in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV, ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Right, let's take a look at this story now. It's business news. Yeah, it is a Thursday. And let's find out what's happening in the business. And we say good morning to Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning. And our top business story this hour, Angola's first major copper mine, Tetelo, is set to begin production soon, marking a significant step in the country's efforts to diversify its economy beyond oil and tap into clean energy minerals. Angola's Mines Minister, Diamantino Azevedo, says the $250 million project owned by China's Shining Star Icarus is expected to produce around 25,000 metric tons of copper concentrate annually during its first 2 years. He says the mine will start as an open pit operation, with underground mining scheduled to commence in the second half of 2026. The launch of Tetelo reflects Angola's growing ambition to attract investment into critical minerals that support the global clean energy transition. President Cyril Ramaphosa will today meet with the Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh on a state visit. Vietnam is expanding its consumer market, which presents promising opportunities for South African exporters, particularly in the context of the country's strategic efforts to diversify trade destinations. The trip follows a visit to Indonesia, where President Ramaphosa is on a 3-nation tour in the Southeast Asia. Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, says the president's visit to Hanoi is important as South Africa aims to strengthen its relations with Asian countries.
This leg of the visit is very, very important for also diversification of our markets into the Vietnam economy, because Vietnam is one of the fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia. It remains a very important market. It's a developing country, an emerging market.
Oil company Shell says it's applied to gain the right to appeal against the decision of a South African court to block exploration in the offshore Block 567. The company says it has filed an application for leave to appeal alongside the government in relation to the Western Cape High Court's judgment on Block 567, which overturned the company's environmental permit for an oil exploration block off the west coast of South Africa. Shell says it's of the view that the High Court judgment misinterprets the National Environmental Management Act. Oil companies are aiming to drill off South Africa's west coast, where the so-called Orange Basin extends from Namibia southwards into South African waters. The Cabinet of KwaZulu-Natal Province in South Africa has approved the establishment of an essential investment office aimed at eliminating bureaucracy and redundant regulations. The aim is to eliminate delays in the commencement of major projects. This announcement was made during the KwaZulu-Natal Trade and Investment Conference in Durban. The conference brings together international and domestic investors with an aim to boost the province's GDP and create job opportunities. MEC for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Reverend Musa Zondi, elaborates.
The Provincial Executive Council, which is the Cabinet of KwaZulu-Natal, approved the proposal from the Premier to say in his office he wanted to establish, which is already established, a central investment office which is going to facilitate to work with these investors so that they don't run around to Home Affairs on their own. They don't run around applying for electricity on their own. They don't run around to municipalities applying for this paper. All must be done on the same desk within a few days so that these investors can hit the ground running.
Oil prices have risen 2.5% today after the United States Treasury announced new substantial sanctions against Russian oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil, citing Moscow's lack of serious commitment to a peace process to end war in Ukraine. In a statement, Treasury said the action increased pressure on Russia's energy sector and degraded the Kremlin's ability to raise revenue for its war machine, which is in turn used to support what the US described as Russia's weakened economy. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
This is a significant shift in policy by the Trump administration, a move designed to inflict enough damage on the Russian economy to encourage President Putin to end the war in Ukraine. Announcing the new sanctions, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said they were needed to address Russia's lack of serious commitment to a peace process. He called for an immediate ceasefire and urged America's allies to support the US and adhere to the sanctions. The two oil companies are responsible for more than half of all Russian production.
Well, the price of Brent crude oil is currently at $64.30 a barrel this morning. Now, looking at the rest of the indicators, one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,465 naira. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 25. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 20. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 52. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rial 39. Russia 81 rubles 50. In India it's 87 rupees 74. China 7 yuan 12. In South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 41 cents this morning, lower than yesterday morning's opening. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,091 per ounce, platinum at $1,575 per ounce. And those are your business news. For any business news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. AUSISA, the Association of Water and Sanitation Institution of South Africa, is a platform uniting Africa's water professionals. This November, Africa leads the conversation on water and sanitation. Join global and African leaders at the AUSISA Africa and Global South Dialogue 2025 from the 9th till the 12th of November at the Emperor's Palace, Johannesburg. From policy innovation, this is where action meets collaboration for a water-secure future. Register today at ausisa-watersan-dialogue.org or follow at AUSISA on social media. AUSISA, working together for sustainable water and sanitation security in Africa. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Africa.
United Nations in South Africa, in partnership with the City of Tshwane, the Pretoria Art Museum, Mosaic Art by Natanya and other partners, will today commemorate United Nations Day 2025, marking the 80th anniversary of the UN under the global theme UN 80, a legacy of hope, solidarity and action. Celebrated annually on October 24th, United Nations Day commemorates the establishment of the United Nations in 1945. This day is devoted to promoting global unity, international cooperation, and the organization's work in advancing peace, human rights, and sustainable development. Here's Nhlanhla Mahlangu with more.
The celebration highlights 8 decades of the UN's contribution to peace, dignity, and equality, while reaffirming the importance of multilateralism, sustainability, and collective action in addressing today's global challenges. As part of its 80th anniversary activities, the UN in South Africa and its partners are today hosting a community outreach and environmental stewardship event at the Pretoria Art Museum. UN staff, university students, and community volunteers will join for a tree planting and clean up, followed by an artistic showcase unveiling sustainable installations celebrating the UN's legacy of inclusion, creativity, and collective action. Nelson Mufu, UN resident coordinator in South Africa, says as the United Nations turns 80, it is a milestone of a celebration, reflection, and renewal.
Born from the ashes of war, the UN was founded on a simple but powerful truth. Humanity is stronger when we stand together in the pursuit of peace, shared prosperity, and human rights. The founding vision, We the Peoples, continues to unite the world for a common purpose. For South Africa, the story is deeply personal. The UN stood as a partner in the struggle against apartheid, committed to safeguarding peace and upholding human rights for all. Today, this promise lives on in every partnership, every policy, and every community where the UN is at work, encouraging job creation and inclusive growth, empowering women and youth, strengthening education, food, energy and health systems, tackling inequality and inefficient governance, advancing resilience building and climate action, and supporting South Africa's leadership in Africa and in the world.
UN Day has traditionally been marked throughout the world with meetings, discussions, and exhibits about the achievements and goals of the organization. South Africa is one of the original 51 founding members of the UN, established on the 24th of October in 1945. Today, the organization has grown to 193 member states working together for peace, development, and human rights. There are more than 17 UN agencies working across South Africa alongside government, civil society, and communities. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
The 4th International Conference on Public Health in Africa, CIFIA 2025, is taking place in Durban from 22nd to 25th October under the theme Moving Towards Self-Reliance to Achieve Universal Health Coverage and Health Security in Africa. Co-hosted by Africa CDC and the South African government in collaboration with Africa Bio's 8th Annual Bio-Africa Convention, the conference brings together leaders, policymakers, researchers and youth to strengthen Africa's health systems and reduce dependence on foreign aid. It also sets the stage for the G20 Health Ministers meeting under South Africa's presidency in early November. Joining us this morning to discuss the conference and its implications for the continent is Linton Mchunu, Senior Advisor on Human Capital and Institutional Development at the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, or ODA NEPAD. Linton, thank you for joining us this morning. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good, thanks. And good morning to your listeners and good morning to your viewers.
So at the CFIA 2025 or CPHIA, we're seeing Africa step up as a global voice on health rights. How is ODA NEPAD positioning the continent as a defender of sexual and reproductive health and rights, as well as gender justice, as some global north countries roll back these rights?
Thank you. Yes, indeed, as the African Union Development Agency, we're proud to be also participating in this very important forum that's taking place in Durban at the moment. And of course, as you correctly said, in the recent past, we've seen drastic policy shifts, particularly from the global north as it relates to the subject matter. And this, of course, has been exacerbated by massive funding cuts from, whether it be the traditional funding partners in the north or the west. And of course, this has slowed down a number of critical, health programs or Africa's health agenda in its entirety, which does not only affect SRHR, but also affects, the entire health spectrum, whether it's HIV/AIDS or other related health matters. So as the African Union Development Agency, of course, we're pushing the agenda for domestic resource mobilization. So we begin to support and fund our own health agenda on the continent. And in this regard, we are aggressively driving catalytic health programs, including our programs, which I'll talk to a little bit later. But of course, also in line with our mandate, we're working with member states and regional institutions or regional economic institutions, which serve as the building blocks of the African Union to really strengthen them in terms of driving, the health agenda as it relates to SRHR. Because in Africa, we have to deal with these challenges. We still have, high numbers of gender-based violence, and femicide. We still have challenges around teenage pregnancy, and notwithstanding that we've made some progress on HIV and AIDS, we still have some challenges in those areas. So we have to continue supporting this, Africa's health agenda, and effectively also address issues around SRHR.
When we say Africa owns or Africa should own its narrative, what does that mean in practice when protecting SRHR from family planning to adolescent health? You speak of teenage pregnancy as well, and against rising global conservationists.
Yeah, so effectively, we have to take charge of our own development as Africa. For far too long, our development has been decided on externally, outside the borders of Africa. And this is why, through Agenda 2063, we have all coalesced around the Africa we want, and we are creating our own destiny and our journey as Africans, towards this Africa that we want. Now, this ambitious plan, of course, is premised on finding African solutions to African problems, and healthcare is at the center of Africa's development, as you would know. Now, during COVID-19, you would recall the spotlight was really shone on our low healthcare capacity and a heavy reliance on external supply chains. And at ODA NEPAD, we established what we call Homegrown Solutions Accelerator, which is aimed at strengthening Africa's pandemic resilience and, of course, unlocking the potential of many local products and services that address major gaps in our health system, including maternal, newborn, and child health. And since we started, we were able to accelerate and process through just over 39, local products and institutions into the market. And similarly, earlier this year, we launched the 24 medical products for local manufacture in Africa plan. And you can imagine that Africa imports north of 75 to 80% of its medical products, depending on which part of the continent you're in. And we now have decided that on the African continent, we have decided that we have 24 medical products that we believe can be manufactured in Africa. And we're working with local manufacturers across the continent to strengthen their manufacturing base and begin producing our own medicines at scale to service the African markets. And I'm happy to share with you that over 67% of these products are specifically for maternal, newborn, and child health. Whether it's oxytocin, whether it's misoprostol, magnesium sulfate, anti-dehydrals, and rotavirus vaccine, amongst others. And this will ensure that we provide greater access to quality, safe, and affordable medicines to the African market without external dependencies, especially in clinics and healthcare facilities in rural areas. And by extension, of course, this includes family planning and other commodities.
Ministers are also unified, ministers around the departments of women's, children's and adolescents' health by the Global Leaders Network. So how will this political weight translate then into continent-wide protection of the SRHR, especially amid global setbacks and rollbacks, rather, in funding?
Thanks. So we're working closely, of course, with the Global Leaders Network, which is championed and led by His Excellency President Ramaphosa. And we work very closely with him to ensure, and the network itself, to ensure that we institutionalize women's, children's and adolescent health. Of course, what we want to do is really depoliticize it and ensure that it becomes a standing agenda on the African Union, at the African Union agenda. And I think we're close to reaching this reality because we have to understand that sexual and reproductive health, and by extension, maternal, newborn, and child health, are the foundations of health equity, particularly for women, youth, and children. And when we address SRHR, we strengthen the entire health system, particularly primary health care. And of course, SRHR is also a key pillar to universal health coverage. But most importantly, I think maternal, newborn, and child health outcomes is a critical development indicator and reflects broadly on education, gender, and equity and social development of any country. And so to realize this, you need political will at the highest level, but also strong leadership. And this is primarily what the leadership of President Ramaphosa through GLN and of course our CEO, Her Excellency Madam Nados Bekele-Thomas is doing. They're really galvanizing support for heads of state and ministers of health and ministers of finance, of course, to rapidly drive the primary health care agenda and universal health care agenda and realization, at least, of which SRH is a key pillar.
Linton, thank you so much again for your time and all the best for the rest of that gathering, and have a great rest of your day.
Just before I go, I must indicate that how we drive some of these key initiatives, and of course work primarily with GLN, is through a program that we've just initiated around the African demographic dividend and sexual reproductive health. We've invested $100 million into this program over the next 5 years, where we are assisting in terms of high-level political advocacy, policy advancements, and of course making sure that we strengthen Africa's health system across the African continent and with the ranks. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Linton Kunu is Senior Advisor on Human Capital and Institutional Development at ODA NEPAD, sharing insights from the Sophia 2025 and Africa's push towards self-reliant, resilient health systems. That gathering happening here in South Africa in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. An interesting surname to have in this time of things in the Madlaga Commission. I'm sure he gets questions, Linton.
All the time,
Okay, never mind. It's 8 o'clock and we enter the third and final hour of Rise and Shine now. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Lots that we'll be looking at, and one of the issues is a sharply worded statement from the International Court of Justice on Israel's occupation and their responsibilities therein. We'll be unpacking that and other stories. But first, here's the news with Onelin Sitsi, and that'll be followed by your sports headlines with Masibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Judges in Cameroon have dismissed calls for the partial or total cancellation of the heavily disputed presidential election, saying they will announce the results on Monday next week. Major cities in the country have been rocked by protests, with opposition supporters alleging that the October 12 poll was marred with irregularities, including ballot stuffing. Judges on the Constitutional Council dismissed 8 petitions citing insufficient evidence of irregularities or lack of jurisdiction to annul the results. Opposition candidate Issa Chiroma Bakari has declared himself winner, a claim rejected by allies of 92-year-old President Paul Biya, who is seeking another 7-year term. A senior official of Tanzania's main opposition party has been arrested amid a crackdown on dissenting voices ahead of next week's general election. Deputy chairperson of Chadema, John Heche, was detained while attempting to attend the treason trial of his party leader, Tundu Lissu. In a statement, Chadema alleged that the government planned to arrest senior party leaders and detain them until after the elections, which will take place on the 29th of October. South Africa's Police Minister, Senzo Mchunu, has admitted that the South African Police Service is battling with corruption and factionalism at its top structures. He appeared for today before Parliament's ad hoc committee yesterday. The committee is investigating allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the justice system made by the KwaZulu-Natal Police Province Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Mchunu says drastic change is needed to overhaul the SAPS and to restore public confidence.
Down the line, you would have needed some measures, maybe not wholesale overhaul, but you would have needed measures to overhaul certain aspects of South African police service if you are to gain confidence. One of those is to say, what are the norms and standards for a police station? Police and policing is what people see on a daily basis.
Meanwhile, South Africa's former OR Tambo District Municipal Council Speaker Xolile Nkompela is threatening to see Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. This after Mchunu testified before the ad hoc committee in Parliament that Nkompela was ambushed and died in 2021. Nkompela addressed the media in the Eastern Cape province where he voiced his anger at Mchunu's utterances. He says Minister Mchunu did not even reach out to him to apologize, saying this has not only affected him but his entire family.
If he was a responsible person and cared about us, he should have called me and contacted my family. Now, as my colleague and belonging to the same family, he should have, at least if he missed to call me yesterday or call me early hours of today. Now I have realized that now he doesn't care about anything. So we have to take that legal route to sue him. This affected me. I'm in pains. I lost my wife. In September, we lost our daughter. And my kids are still undergoing that.
Lastly, the International Court of Justice has found that Israel has an obligation under the international human rights law to respect, protect and fulfill the human rights of the Palestinian population. The ICJ rendered its advisory opinion in response to a UN General Assembly request on Israel's obligations to facilitate aid to Palestinians. This after Israel banned operations by the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees, Sean Bryce Peace reports.
The 11 judges decided that Israel, as the occupying power, was required to fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law by ensuring that the population in the occupied Palestinian territory had the essential supplies of daily life. The court said Israel had to agree to facilitate by all means at its disposal relief schemes on behalf of the OPT population, so long as that population was inadequately supplied, as has been the case in Gaza. This included relief provided by the UN, its entities including UNRWA and other international organizations and third states.
Channel Africa News, I'm Oneli Zinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, Sawa CAF announces award nominees, while Makazole Mapimpi has received a 5-match suspension, meaning that he's been ruled out of the Springbok November tour. I'll tell you more at 8:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Now, the World Court in The Hague has issued a sharply worded advisory opinion holding the International Court of Justice finds that Gaza remains under occupation and that Israel is legally obliged to cooperate with the United Nations agencies to ensure humanitarian aid reaches the territory. In particular, the court found that the blockade and suspension of aid operations violates Israel's international obligations. It cleared the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, of credible evidence or bias or links to Hamas. The ruling comes as a fragile ceasefire holds and as South Africa's genocide case against Israel remains before the same court. With us now is Professor Andre Thomashuizen, who's a Professor Emeritus of International Law at the University of South Africa, to unpack the legal and political implications. Prof, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning, listeners.
So I suppose what we need help with as audiences across the continent is, in essence, what is the court's opinion and what are the key legal findings therein? And why might it be described by some as a rebuke against Israel?
Well, I think for starters, it is important to remember that this is not an ordinary court. There is no enforcement mechanism. The court cannot enforce anything. It is an advisory opinion, and other United Nations organs like the United Nations General Assembly or the Security Council are obliged to read it, to take notice, but they're under no obligation to actually implement anything. So it is a statement. It will have a moral, a persuasive authority, but nothing beyond that. In the statement, I find nothing new because since the ruling of the International Court of Justice on what used to be Southwest Africa, now Namibia, the principle was established that an occupation power, by occupying a territory and its people, assumes a lot of responsibilities. It must be held responsible for the welfare of the people that are being occupied. That, again, is a very wide concept, from the provision of maybe 2 liters of water per day to each person to actual well-being can be a far stretch. That is where this advisory opinion will be criticized, because it simply assumes that Israel is an occupying power in the West Bank, knowing that Israel withdrew completely from the West Bank and handed over all authority in the West Bank to the political organization, later armed political organization Hamas. And this happened a long time ago. And since that time, Israel does not maintain any police stations in Gaza, does not build any roads there, does not provide water, does not provide electricity. So Israel can always argue that it is not an occupying power. It is at war against Hamas, and it is waging war in Gaza, but that doesn't make it an occupying power. So those are the two essentials. The advisory opinion has actually no immediate force and effect, and it rests on an assumption of occupation of Gaza. And I would say any observer, any listener can very easily see that most of Gaza cannot actually be freely entered. It is a war zone. You cannot just take your car and drive into there. So how could Israel be deemed an occupying power?
But isn't going into a territory in war occupation?
Only if you establish effective authority. If you start issuing ID documents, if you start counting the population, if you start running police stations, fire stations, hospitals, whatever. If you
Okay,
just have
so another
occasional
notable
forces,
finding, though,
then
is that UNRWA has not been shown to have breached its neutrality, contrary to Israeli claims. How significant is that finding for UNRWA's operations and reputation?
well, it is the ICJ saw fit to rule like that. Most developed nations and the great powers in this world, including China, including Russia, including India, they think otherwise. They have cut the funding to UNRWA, and they have made many findings available that UNRWA was actually an extension of Hamas and was completely infiltrated by Hamas. Be that as it may, the ICJ ruling will not change anything about the status of UNRWA, and it will not make life easier for those people that are promoting UNRWA.
You say that most people believe that it was infiltrated, but where was the evidence in court?
I don't know, maybe people didn't even bother to put evidence before the court because these advisory opinions by the major powers in this world are just considered irrelevant. They also, this entire argument is becoming obsolete with the ceasefire and the envisaged peace agreement, which is endorsed by all great powers in the world and all the regional powers around in that region, around Gaza. It is basically just Iran and South Africa that are continuing to fight a fight which has become obsolete through history. The fighting has ended. People are very seriously working towards a peace agreement, and everything else is history.
If we then say that Israel is not an occupying force in Gaza, does that mean that they're not under any obligation to allow humanitarian aid to reach those in need?
Well, Israel is under the obligation of observing humanitarian law, mainly the Geneva Conventions on how the use of force is conducted, and that includes where their forces control access, that access must be limited to military purposes, and it is under humanitarian obligations not to harm civilian populations. And again, there's a huge debate on fact. Israel has shown aerial photography of hundreds of aid trucks parked, stationed, immobilized at entry points because Hamas doesn't allow them to progress into the territory. Many people driving these trucks and organizing these trucks are refusing to enter the territory because their drivers are at risk of dying. The trucks get stopped and looted. So there is big controversy about the actual facts. I think what we can say is that despite the many alarming worries, there is not a famine in Gaza. And we haven't seen evidence of people that have died of hunger, contrary to, for instance, Somalia or Sudan, where you see people with a body weight below 50 kilograms that look like skeletons. There's no such evidence from Gaza.
I wonder, how does this latest opinion affect the South African genocide case against Israel? Might it influence this case before the same court?
Probably the court is indicating, it is showing an inclination to be harsh or to be tough on Israel, or not to accept Israel's lines of argument or defenses, and that could weigh in favor of the genocide application that is led by South Africa. There is, however, the risk that the court will be forced to declare the whole matter moot when it finally decides on the genocide matter, because it is not the court's obligation to rule on history, to rule on past things. The application was to prevent a genocide from happening, and if there is no evidence that any genocide is currently happening, then whatever happened in the past might be irrelevant before the court. So let us see when the court sees fit to set a date for a further hearing or to pronounce a ruling.
Okay, so perhaps in the court of public opinion it has a different effect, but on the ground in reality, this advisory unlikely to change anything that's been happening and change Israel's behavior.
I think it is an important reminder to Israel that there are international norms, and international norms will influence the perceptions, the views of countries and the way they interact with Israel. So if a country is found to be violating humanitarian law, then that will, of course, affect its diplomatic status and its ability to interact with other countries and to be respected. And the goodwill of a country the good name of a country is important. But tangible, precise consequences, I see none. And that is in the nature of the International Court of Justice. It is a bit like a moral court. It is not a court as we know it in our national legal system.
Professor, we're going to have to leave it there, but your thoughts, insights, always greatly appreciated on the program. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. It is a pleasure.
That was Professor Andre Thomashuizen, who's a Professor Emeritus for International Law at the University of South Africa, sharing his thoughts on the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion on Israel's continuing obligations in Gaza. He says they're at war. They're not an occupying force. Therefore, those obligations are not the same.
Siyabangena manje. Vito iJabulani Nkolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Senegal has sharply increased its projected debt service bill by around $5.8 billion over the next 3 years. The revised budget follows newly acknowledged billions of dollars in liabilities that were hidden by the previous government. The revised figures were released during the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and World Bank annual meetings in Washington, marking one of the most dramatic adjustments to a sovereign debt profile in recent African history. To speak further about this, we're joined on the line by Dr. Tafadzwa Ruzive, a postdoctoral researcher in international affairs at the University of the Free State's International Office. Dr. Ruzive, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning, Asanda, and the viewers, listeners.
Thanks for making time for us this morning. So from your point of view, does this debt stock reconcile the Court of Auditors figures and prior government reports?
The IMF is satisfied with the reconciliation that has happened. So taking our cue from the IMF, we could say that it does reconcile. But knowing the nature of debt issuance and financial emissions that happen in economies, maybe there is still something. There are still some debts that are hidden. But currently, so far as things go, the IMF is looking satisfied with the disclosures that have happened, and thus we can say that it does reconcile the Court of Auditors and the government debt reports.
Is there a clear strategy to reduce reliance on expensive commercial borrowing and to rebuild access to concessional financing there?
There are no clear strategies at the moment. What is on the horizon is the oil revenues that are going to come from the Sangoma oil finds that Senegal wants to is exploiting to access more foreign currency and be able to settle its foreign obligations. However, in the same breath, the IMF debts really do not seem to be Senegal's biggest problem, because as a country that is using the CFA franc under a pegged exchange rate regime with the French Treasury, the CFA franc is overvalued, and the revenues that might come out of the export revenues that come out of Senegal are muted, because the exports are not competitive because of the CFA arrangement that Senegal has with France. So while exports and the oil is coming online, the overhang, I think, is that a keen eye should be kept on the administrative structures, the administrative structures that make Senegalese exports uncompetitive on global markets vis-a-vis their ability to settle their external debts. So while Senegal is trying to make ways on the administrative front via the CFA franc and the French Treasury, adjustments may need to be made to make it easier for West African countries to settle IMF debts.
What message should bondholders take from these revised projections? Should they expect restructuring, or could the government intend to defend all contracted terms?
That all depends on, given the administrative structure that I've described, at the end of the day, it seems to Senegal's fate depends on what the French Treasury, what France in particular, wants to do with Senegalese resources. Because as we speak, after Senegal exports makes all of its exports, 50% of all its export revenue is sent to the French Treasury, where it is helping France where it helps France to overcome its to keep in line with its European fiscal straitjacket, the 3% deficit and the 3% deficit and 60% debt thresholds. So when you take out 50% of a country's ability to settle its debts, ultimately France is in control here. So it gets cheap resources by making them uncompetitive. It can come and undercut exporters in Senegal, get the Senegalese resources for cheap, and because it controls the foreign currency for Senegal. So that the French interests are very important to understand in whether we are going to get a reprofiling or we are going to go. The government is going to stick it out and absorb the debt payments as they come. So it's still very hazy. The clue should be taken from what France needs, and given the riots in France, I suspect that France would really like to keep export prices in Senegal suppressed, and as a result might actually push the government to defend things as they are, because a restructuring is going to create problems for the value chain, for the exports, for the flow of real goods into real raw materials and goods into France. So under this administrative arrangement, I foresee a defense and to keep the stability of the structure going forward. That's what investors can expect.
If the IMF debt sustainability analysis concludes that debt is unsustainable for Senegal, what should the government's contingency plan for immediate liquidity be outside of France, a more local or even regional intervention?
Outside of CFA denominated debt via the BCEMA, currently there are very few sources. So if the IMF and the World Bank do not have a delay due to these discussions, and their credit card in quotes at the West African Central Bank is maxed out, there could be a period, unless if the oil revenues come online quickly enough, there's going to be a problem there are going to be some liquidity problems with respect to settling some of their obligations. But the international financial architecture is changing. In the East, we have seen Kenya and Ethiopia transform their loans from US dollar loans to yuan loans. So China is on the prowl, and there might be some sense in getting a yuan line to settle this, if really Senegal is being pinned into a corner, as it is what it seems. I foresee there being wisdom in going for a Chinese yuan loan to refinance the US dollar loan and try and settle these immediate liquidity concerns. Because at the end of the day, the target is to make Senegalese exports and labor super cheap for the benefit of France, their former colonized.
Which social programs might face cuts in Senegal given higher debt service, and what should the country be doing to protect vulnerable groups?
Fuel subsidies. I had the fuel, electricity, and there are fuel and electricity subsidies that are being targeted for cuts. So those are in the front line, and transportation sector, bus fare, government bus fare and transport subsidies that are going to be cut. I'm happy so far on the plan for the vulnerable in terms of health and education and social support. The conversation is not gotten into those lines. So we are seeing the IMF is moving towards a restructuring of Senegalese industry to try and spare US dollars to pay off this debt. So the vulnerable seem to be off the table at the moment, but industry is going to be going through a massive restructuring. This is under the assumption that much of the energy and electricity and transportation costs are going to affect the business sector and not affect the social support line that Senegal has for the vulnerable and the poor.
Dr. Rozive, thank you so much again for your time. We appreciate it.
No, thank you for the interview. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Dr. Tafadzwa Ruzive is a postdoctoral researcher in international affairs at the University of the Free State in South Africa, coming with the backdrop of revised budget flows for Senegal from the IMF or the International Monetary Fund and World Bank annual meetings. These are taking place currently in Washington. It's almost time to head over to news. Still to come as we talk of economics on the show. We go to Nigeria, talking about the construction sector there. It's on an upward trajectory. So that's coming up later on Rise and Shine. 8:30 Central African Time. Over to you, Onele, with news headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Judges in Cameroon have dismissed calls for the partial or total cancellation of the heavily disputed presidential election, saying they will announce the results on Monday next week. South Africa's former police minister Beda will appear before Parliament's ad hoc committee over the next 2 days. The committee was established following allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the criminal justice system made by the KwaZulu-Natal Province Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. And the head of the World Health Organization says the UN agency led the medical evacuation of 41 critical patients from Gaza yesterday. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus called for all routes into the Palestinian territory to be opened. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Let's catch you up with some sport. Here's Musibudi Rachel Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Good morning once again from the Sports Day. So the Confederation of African Football, CAF, yesterday made the announcement of the nominees in the men's categories for the CAF Awards 2025, celebrating the continent's top performers among players, coaches, clubs, as well as national teams. Now, the Super Eagles tailsman Victor Osimhen has been shortlisted for the 2025 African Footballer of the Year award, with his toughest challenge expected now to come from Morocco's Achraf Hakimi, as well as Mohamed Salah of Egypt. So apart from Osimhen, Hakimi as well as Salah, other nominees listed for the CAF award are Frank Agusa of Cameroon, also plays for Napoli, Fiston Mayela, who's from the Democratic Republic of Congo, playing of course for Pyramids FC out in Egypt. There's also Dennis Boanga of Gabon and plays for the Los Angeles Football Club. Now Sesu Gurasia, who plays for Guinea and also plays for Borussia Dortmund out in Germany, and Osama Lamoluni, who plays for Tunisia and also plays for Etoile du Sahel in Tunisia, and also the likes of Papa Mata Sarr, who plays for the Teranga Lions of Senegal and also plies his trade in the Premier League for Tottenham Hotspur. Back home now, Orlando Pirates head coach Abdelaslam Wadu says that the World 1-0 victory of Polokwane City, although their intentions were to bag just a few more goals in front of their fans on Wednesday night. The Buccaneers will need to improve their conversion rate come Saturday when they host the Democratic Republic of Congo outfit Saint Elou Lupopo in the return leg of the CAF Champions League preliminary second-round clash, chasing a 3-0 deficit. But in the Betway Premiership last night, the 6th-minute strike from winger Tsapang Moremi was satisfactory enough for Coach Wadu.
We could have scored more goals. Let's say maybe four goals. We had a little bit of pressure because since we didn't score this second goal, the opponent was pushing, adding some more attacking players. But I have to congratulate the boys. They had a great character, great personality to be strong, to keep this clean sheet again. It was not an easy game.
On to rugby news now, Makazole Mapimpi has received a 5-match suspension following a red card against Ulster, ruling him out of the Springbok standby squad for their November tour and the Sharks' upcoming URC clash against the Scarlets. Now, the incident occurred during the Sharks' 34-26 loss to Ulster in Durban in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province, where Mapimpi was sent off in the 55th minute for a dangerous tip tackle on fullback Mike Laurie. Now, the United Rugby Championship Disciplinary Committee deemed the foul play serious enough to warrant a 6-week sanction, but reduced it to 5 after Mapimpi accepted responsibility. In tennis news now, the world number 5 Novak Djokovic announced that he will not compete at the upcoming Paris Masters, which will be held next week from the 27th of October to the 2nd of November. In a post shared on social media, Djokovic did not give a reason for his decision and expressed his hope to return to the event in 2026. Djokovic has not played at the Paris Masters since winning a record 7th ATP title at the Masters 1000 event back in 2023 as he skipped the 2024 edition. The 38-year-old was not expected to play the prestigious indoor hardcourt tournament this year, given the way that he has managed his schedule in the past 2 seasons. Now, Djokovic appeared at the Shanghai Masters earlier on in this month, which was also only his 12th ATP level tournament of the 2025 season. The Serb's confirmation that he will miss the Paris Masters comes 3 days after he retired in the third-place playoff match with Taylor Fritz at the Six Kings Slam exhibition match played in Saudi Arabia this past weekend. And finally, Max Verstappen's chase a 4th win in 5 starts this weekend as he bids now to heap more pressure on McLaren duo of Oscar Piastri as well as Lando Norris at the Mexico City Grand Prix, one of his most rewarding tracks. Now, Red Bull's Ford Tour world champion, who has won 5 times in 7 years at the high-altitude Autodroma Hermanos Rodriguez, has cut Piastri's lead ahead of him in third place from 104 points to 40 since August, with a scintillating burst of form. Now, Piastri still leads teammate Norris by 14 points, but he has lost his metronomic consistency, and as McLaren appear to be floundering to match Red Bull for pace, he appears also like Norris to be weighed down by the pressure of the title battle. So after missing on the podium in every race bar one since the season opener in Australia, his last 3 results have been a retirement, 4th and 5th positions respectively. And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk this hour on Channel Africa. For any sports stories that you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news with the On The Move team in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126, and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So yeah, that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with a community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And now let's check in with the world of business. We say good morning again to Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda. Good morning, and a very good morning to our listeners. Our top story: Angola's first major copper mine, Tetelo, is set to begin production soon, marking a significant step in the country's efforts to diversify its economy beyond oil and tap into clean energy minerals. Angola's mines minister, Diamantino Azevedo, says the $250 million project, owned by China's shining star Icarus, is expected to produce around 25,000 metric tons of copper concentrate annually during its first 2 years. He says the mine will start as an open pit operation, with underground mining scheduled to commence in the second half of 2026. The launch of Tetelo reflects Angola's growing ambition to attract investment into critical minerals that support the global clean energy transition. President Cyril Ramaphosa will today meet with the Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh on a state visit. Vietnam is expanding its consumer market, which presents promising opportunities for South African exporters, particularly in the context of the country's strategic efforts to diversify trade destinations. The trip follows a visit to Indonesia, where President Ramaphosa is on a 3-nation tour in the southeast of Asia. Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, says the president's visit to Hanoi is important as South Africa aims to strengthen its relations with the Asian countries.
This leg of the visit is very, very important for also diversification of our markets into the Vietnam economy, because Vietnam is one of the fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia. It remains a very important market. It's a developing country, an emerging market.
Oil company Shell says it's applied to gain the right to appeal against the decision of a South African court to block exploration in the offshore Block 567. The company says it's filed an application for leave to appeal alongside the government in relation to the Western Cape High Court judgment on Block 567, which overturned the company's environmental permit for an exploration block off the west coast of South Africa. Shell says it's of the view that the High Court judgment misinterprets the National Environmental Management Act. Oil companies are aiming to drill off South Africa's west coast, where the so-called Orange Basin extends from Namibia southwards into South African waters. The Cabinet of KwaZulu-Natal Province in South Africa has approved the establishment of an essential investment office aimed at eliminating bureaucracy and redundant regulations. The aim is to eliminate delays in the commencement of major projects. This announcement was made during the KwaZulu-Natal Trade and Investment Conference in Durban. The conference brings together international and domestic investors with an aim to boost the province's GDP and create jobs. MEC for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Reverend Musa Zondi, elaborates.
The Provincial Executive Council, which is the Cabinet of KwaZulu-Natal, approved the proposal from the Premier to say in his office he wanted to establish, which is already established, a central investment office, which is going to facilitate to work with these investors so that they don't run around to Home Affairs on their own. They don't run around applying for electricity on their own. They don't run around to municipalities applying for this paper. All must be done on the same desk within a few days so that these investors can hit the ground running.
Oil prices have risen 2.5% today after the United States Treasury announced new substantial sanctions against Russian oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil, citing Moscow's lack of serious commitment to a peace process to end the war in Ukraine. In a statement, Treasury said the action increased pressure on Russia's energy sector and degraded the Kremlin's ability to raise revenue for its war machine, which is in turn used to support what the U.S. described as Russia's weakened economy. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
This is a significant shift in policy by the Trump administration, a move designed to inflict enough damage on the Russian economy to encourage President Putin to end the war in Ukraine. Announcing the new sanctions, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said they were needed to address Russia's lack of serious commitment to a peace process. He called for an immediate ceasefire and urged America's allies to support the US and adhere to the sanctions. The two oil companies are responsible for more than half of all Russian production.
The price of Brent crude oil this morning is at $64.30 a barrel. Now looking at the rest of the indicators, $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,465 naira. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 25. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 20. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 52. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rial 39. Russia, 81 rubles 50. In India, it's 87 rupees 74. China, 7 yuan 12, and South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 41 cents this morning. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,091 per ounce. Platinum at $1,575 per ounce, and as mentioned earlier, Brent crude oil is at $64.30 a barrel. Those are your business news. I'll be back with another update in the next hour. For any business news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hetbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Nigeria's construction sector is on an upward trajectory, fueled by urban expansion and a growing demand for sustainable infrastructure. That's according to DMG Events. This momentum was on full display at the 5th edition of Big Five Construct Nigeria, which recently concluded at the Landmark Centre in Lagos. Now, the event brought together 9,800 professionals and industry leaders for 3 days of innovation, collaboration and knowledge exchange. Well, to speak to us a little bit more about this, we're now joined by Josine Heymans, who's the Senior Vice President at DMG Events. Josine, thank you very much indeed for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So, what do you attribute this large turnout at this year's event?
Well, I think, of course, one of the biggest drivers really of the success and of this event edition was really the close alignment with Nigeria's construction priorities. We saw a fantastic turnout of 145 exhibitors joining us, both local and internationally. Over 9,800 professionals joining us this year, really joining us for conversations on construction and also like latest product displays, really addressing the country's needs in housing, infrastructure development and sustainable development as well. And I think it's another really important factor is the value that the people get from being at the show, whether it's really sourcing latest products and innovations, or getting updates at our CPD certified Big Five talks, which are there to really share latest industry updates and case studies from industry experts.
Sustainability and green buildings were strong themes this year. What were some of the key takeaways that you found from the sessions led by the Green Building Council Nigeria and perhaps some other experts?
Yeah, so sustainability and green building were really at the heart of this year's event. We had the Green Building Council Nigeria speaking in our talk series, and they really emphasized the need to be truly sustainable, the need kind of for innovation to go hand in hand with environmental conscious solutions and also local culture. We were very pleased to welcome experts like Mumbo Olayame Afolabi, talking about how you can integrate art and local aesthetics into urban design. Also architect Emmanuel Falude, he highlighted the importance of passive cooling and climate responsive design, really showing how homes can be cooler, still be affordable, but also distinctive Nigerian without per se heavily relying on energy intensive technologies.
Given the number of people and the nature of the people there, are you finding that the Big Five Construct platform is assisting and maybe even shaping policy and driving collaboration between the public and private sector?
Of course, I mean, with the population in Nigeria, expected to reach 400 million by 2050. So, I mean, we're talking about a growth of 5 million people every year. So there is a massive demand for housing. There is massive infrastructure needs. And as Big Five Construct Nigeria, for us, it's really important to be that annual platform where the industry comes together, and whether it's policymakers, developers, contractors, technology providers. It's really the place where the industry brings together to talk about these priorities on sustainable housing and infrastructure delivery. And it's really exciting to see that also genuine collaboration and partnerships evolve from these discussions on site at the event.
What came through in terms of innovation? What are we looking at in the coming years?
Of course, I mean, it's really important for us to continue to build on this momentum. The industry really made it clear that it wants faster delivery of projects, smarter technologies, and of course, continuous focus on building these strong partnerships. And that's, of course, where we're heading. So we will continue to focus on bringing new innovations into the country, also providing those practical solutions to really help accelerate project outcomes. We're also planning to expand the knowledge sharing platforms, being through more interactive sessions, more live demos on the show floor, and of course, opportunities for local firms to connect also with international stakeholders and experts. And I think very exciting to mention as well is that we will be back, of course, with Big Five Construct Nigeria next year, September. But prior to that, we are launching 2 new events, our HVAC Nigeria, as well as our West Africa Infrastructure Expo, both there to support Nigeria's infrastructure goals and to further strengthen the built environment.
What were delegates putting forward as some of the challenges that still need to be overcome?
Well, I think, of course, there is still, of course, interest and need kind of to further embrace new technologies. We had in some of our talk series a dedicated focus, of course, highlighting, for example, the use of 3D printing, modular system. We had architect Sebastien Abang John Thomas highlighting how some of these technologies are actually already used in other markets in Kenya and India. So it's really benefiting kind of the attendees, how some of those applications that have worked in other markets, how can they be further also integrated in Nigeria. And it's also great to see, how some of the leading brands we had, for example, on the show floor, Perry and Bosch, really showcasing some of the latest innovation, whether it being from advanced formwork systems or digital construction tools. It's really an opportunity for delegates, for attendees to get hands-on with some of these latest technologies and to see how they can be integrated in the construction projects in Nigeria.
And perhaps as you look ahead already to 2026, I have no doubt that you get a couple of days off and you start looking forward to the next one. What do you plan for the next Construct Nigeria?
Yeah, so it's really building on the momentum that we have, bringing new innovations, bringing more content aligned with the needs of the construction industry. And like I mentioned, we very much look forward to be there again, also with some of our new launch editions in April next year at the Landmark Exhibition Center in Lagos.
20 countries, I believe, represented this time around. I guess more countries, but I'm just curious, how similar are the issues across 20 nations that you found?
Of course, I think very important, every country probably will have its own opportunities and sometimes also challenges. But I think it's, what we try to do with our Big Five series is also really, sharing some of the best practices and case studies that have worked in other locations. And it's, how can these solutions be adapted into the respective markets to benefit the local ambitions of construction and infrastructure development in country.
Josine, that's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on this huge event, and we wish you the best of luck in your next edition.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Josine Heymans, Senior Vice President at DMG Events, talking to us about the Big Five Construct Nigeria that took place, and over 9,800 delegates were part of that. And I guess that shouldn't be a surprise if you think about the size of Nigeria. So, we are hoping to find out what's happening on the move just after the 9 o'clock news with What's his name? Benjamin.
Benjamin. I think he's solo today because his partner is
gosh.
traveling the continent. Palace is not around. So as we were talking about United Nations Day, also to note on this day on the African continent, I'm going to talk about this one because I'm being selfish. I'm touching on my ethnic group of Xhosas. So in 1920, back in this day in history, Nontisi Mgqwetho's first poem was published. It was the first poem which was by a pivotal female Xhosa poet, and it was published under her clan name Cizama. Her work encouraged unity among black South Africans and is now being rediscovered. Also in 1958, the South Africa's Department of Coloured Affairs was established. This was under the apartheid regime, and this department was created to enforce policies and manage the lives of the mixed race coloured population, implementing segregation and discrimination through measures like the Group Areas Act. Of course, if you're South African, you remember that. So those two ethnic groups there, the Xhosas and the Coloured, looking back in history.
Eastern Cape this weekend, I can see they will welcome you with open arms.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, Benjamin, a very good morning to you, brother.
Hey, good morning, guys. How you doing?
Yeah.
How's it like riding solo?
Hey, it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a long show though, hey, when you're on your own.
Nah, we get used to this thing over time.
Strong, hey?
Yeah, I've got this on muscle. I'm joking. Yeah, we miss Bali, of course.
Yeah.
Hey, man, today we're going to be looking at something very interesting in our parenting feature. We're going to be looking at raising twins equally and with love, but also celebrating their differences. The thing about twins, they do look alike, right? And some of them are not, fraternal. So it's going to be interesting to look at that because we usually share the same birthday, the same wardrobe. You've got a secret language between the two of you. But raising twins is never just a copy and paste job. Usually there's kind of multiple dynamics that it includes.
Do you know, it's really weird. My sister and I was born a year and 3 days before her.
No, you guys are not twins.
No, but here's the thing. Because my birthday is on the 6th of March, hers is on the 9th, we always had the same party.
Okay, I get you.
So we almost grew up like twins, even though we weren't.
Yeah.
But we were treated the same. So it was quite an interesting dynamic. So
did you wear matching outfits?
No,
as kids?
I didn't wear dresses. No.
Well, colors can match as well. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's what's coming up.
It's interesting though because what I found is that you can have children in the same house with the same parents, same exposure to everything.
Yeah.
But they're very different.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the same with particularly identical twins, because I think fraternal twins, you know, you can have a boy and a girl and they're very different. But identical twins, I mean, the chromosomes, everything is almost a carbon copy.
Sure.
And I wonder how long it takes for the parents to be able to tell them apart, the identical twins.
I think moms know straight away.
Immediately?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting.
I think moms know.
I have a friend who's got twins. Maybe I should ask her. She's got twin girls. They I think around a year and 3 months old now.
Yeah.
Still small.
Cool.
No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we look forward to that conversation. Benjamin Mushatama, a presenter extraordinaire of the award-winning show On
Absolutely.
the Move.
Thank you. I always feel good, man, when you say these things.
All right, so that access brings us to the end of our program today, and you're getting on an aeroplane just now.
Yeah, I'm going home. You'll be alone tomorrow. I hope you'll miss me.
I know,
so
we
that
will
I feel a
definitely
little
miss
important.
You. Yeah,
it's just one
the
day.
Eastern Cape is a really nice part of the country. I'm going to be going there towards the end of the month, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, East
Awesome.
London.
Ah,
Yeah.
lovely. All right, so we say goodbye then. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Stay though for the news coming up shortly with Onele Nsinsi, and sports headlines with Musibudi Makura, and of course On the Move with Benjamin Mushatama. From us, have a good day.
Goodbye for now.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Looking at your top stories, at least 40 migrants from sub-Saharan African countries killed off the Tunisian coast. And the WHO head calls for all routes into the Palestinian territory to be opened. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. At least 40 migrants from sub-Saharan African countries have died after their boat sank off the coast of Tunisia in one of the deadliest maritime tragedies in the region this year. The boat was carrying about 70 migrants when it sank near the coastal city of Ahmadiyya. Tunisia has become a key transit country for migrants fleeing conflict and poverty in search of better opportunities in Europe. Judges in Cameroon have dismissed calls for the partial or total cancellation of the heavily disputed presidential election, saying they will announce the results on Monday next week. Major cities in the country have been rocked by protests, with opposition supporters alleging that the October 12 poll was marred by irregularities, including ballot stuffing. Judges on the Constitutional Council dismissed 8 petitions, citing insufficient evidence of irregularities or a lack of jurisdiction to annul the results. Opposition candidate Issa Chiroma Bakari has declared himself winner, a claim that has been rejected by allies of 92-year-old President Paul Biya, who is seeking another 7-year term. South Africa's former police minister Beda will appear before Parliament's ad hoc committee over the next 2 days. The committee was established following allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the criminal justice system made by the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Cele, who was police minister between 2018 to June 2024, would have overseen the operation of the political killings task team during his tenure. The same task team that the minister Senzo Mchunu, who has been placed on special leave, decided to disband on December 31 last year. Yesterday, Mchunu told the African National Congress MP Kusela Diko that his predecessor did not give him any handover notes involving the PKTT.
Not as I read it. What was there, though, was a reference to committees in which the minister was serving, not necessarily the National Political Killings Task Team per se in any form.
Did he maybe give any reason at any point why he did not shut down the unit himself?
Not really. We didn't delve into that matter.
The head of the World Health Organization says the UN agency led the medical evacuation of 41 critical patients from Gaza yesterday. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said they were accompanied by almost 150 companions. He said there were still 15,000 patients waiting for approval to receive medical care outside of Gaza. He has called for all routes into the Palestinian territory to be opened. Now, Kabusa Babu Katulondi, an African politics analyst and writer, says that the coup, which recently took place in Madagascar, serves as a bitter reminder of the culture of coups in Africa. They are usually carried out by the military, which then allows the military leader to take over and stay in power, becoming dictators themselves. This week on Channel Africa Conversations, Peter Ndoro spoke to Katulondi about the different patterns in Africa.
What happened in the Sahel is that it was an occurrence that was designed, conceived, and materialized by the soldiers, by top army officers, and their grievance pertained fundamentally to the mismanagement of the defense force in a context where Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali were confronted by terrorists and rebels, and the leaders, the army officers, realized that the defense force was being mismanaged, mishandled. So they prompted the coup. That was a direct action initiative by the military establishment.
You can catch the full interview of Kabasu Babu Katulondi, who is an African politics analyst and writer, with Peter Ndoro on this week's podcast called Channel Africa Conversations on YouTube. Now, recapping on your top stories, at least 40 migrants from sub-Saharan African countries have died after their boat sank off the coast of Tunisia in one of the deadliest maritime tragedies in the region this year. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.